Red Redondo and the Widow's War. Introduction. A cry for help. Red Redondo had spent years riding alone, always moving, always staying one step ahead of the law. But every once in a while, he'd come across a fight he couldn't ignore. That's what led him to Black Hollow, a town drowning in fear. As Red rode in, he saw the signs, shattered windows, empty streets, people too scared to look up. And at the center of it all stood the biggest ranch for miles, the Blackwood estate. Word was, the widow Eleanor Blackwood had taken up arms against Duke Calloway, a ruthless cattle baron trying to steal her land. Most folks figured the fight was already lost. But Red had never been one to bet against a woman with nothing left to lose. The story. Red stopped outside the general store, tying his horse. The few people walking the streets gave him uneasy glances before scurrying away. "You ain't from around here, are we, eh?" Red turned. The speaker was a wiry old man in a ragged hat, leaning against the store's porch. "No, sir," Red said. "Just passing through." The old man chuckled. "Folks don't just pass through Black Hollow. Not these days." Red leaned on the railing. "What's got the town so spooked?" The old man spat in the dust. "Duke Calloway. Man's got every lawman in his pocket, and any rancher that don't sell to him wins up dead." Red nodded slowly. "And Eleanor Blackwood?" The old man's eyes darkened. "She's the only one still fightin'. But she's alone. Her husband's gone, her ranch hands run off, and Calloway's men are circling like vultures." Red adjusted his hat. "Guess it's time she got some help." The old man blinked. "You looking to get yourself killed, son?" Red smirked. "Wouldn't be the first time." The widow's stand. Red rode out to the Blackwood Ranch just before sunset. The land was scarred with burned fences and bullet holes, a war zone. Near the barn, a woman stood with a Winchester rifle tucked against her shoulder. She was tall, with raven-black hair tied back, her face smudged with dust and exhaustion. She leveled the rifle at Red as he approached. "If you're here to steal from me, turn around." Red tipped his hat. "Ain't here to steal. Just looking to help." She narrowed her eyes. "You work for Calloway?" "If I did, I wouldn't be dumb enough to ride in alone." She hesitated. Then, lowering the rifle, she sighed. "You're either a fool or the best shot this town's ever seen." Red grinned. "Lucky for you, I'm both." The siege begins. That night, Calloway's men came. Red had barely had time to set up defenses before the first gunshot rang out. Boom. A bullet shattered the ranch's front window. Red grabbed his revolver, crouching beside Eleanor. "How many men does he have?" She peered out the window. "A dozen. Maybe more." Red grinned. "That's a fair fight." Eleanor gave him a look. "For who?" Red didn't answer. Instead, he rolled to the door, threw it open, and fired 3 quick shots. Bang! 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 3 men dropped before they even knew what hit them. The rest scattered for cover, firing wildly. Eleanor picked off another from the barn loft, her rifle cracking in the night air. Red moved like lightning, darting between cover, his revolver barking fire. For every shot fired at him, he sent 2 back. And every bullet found its mark. The devil himself. The gunfight didn't last long. By the time the smoke cleared, 9 of Calloway's men were dead, and the rest had fled. But Red knew it wasn't over. Calloway wasn't the kind of man to send his dogs without coming to watch himself. Sure enough, as the dust settled, a lone rider approached. Duke Calloway was a massive man, built like an ox, his face lined with old scars. He rode up slowly, flanked by 2 gunmen, both with rifles trained on Red. He stopped just outside the gate, looking down at the carnage. Well, Calloway rumbled. "Seems I miscalculated." Red holstered his gun. "Seems that way." Calloway smirked. "I admire a man who can hold his ground. But this ain't over." Red tilted his head. "Looks over to me." Calloway chuckled. "You don't get it, do you? I own this town. You think the sheriff's gonna lock me up? The judge? Hell, even the mayor's in my pocket." Eleanor stepped forward. "You may own the town, Calloway, but you don't own this land." Calloway's eyes darkened. That's so. Eleanor raised her rifle. That's so. A tense silence hung in the air. Then, Calloway drew. But Red was faster. Boom. One shot. Calloway's gun flew from his hand, and he staggered backward, clutching his bleeding wrist. Red didn't lower his gun. You can ride out of here, Calloway. Or you can stay and see what the next bullet does. Calloway's jaw tightened. Then he turned and spat in the dirt. This ain't over, Redondo. Red smirked. It is for tonight. With a snarl, Calloway turned his horse and rode off, his men following. Red watched them disappear into the darkness. Then, finally, he holstered his gun. Epilogue, a new beginning. The next morning, the town gathered at the Blackwood Ranch. Word had spread fast, Calloway was gone, his gang broken, and the Blackwood land was safe. Eleanor stood beside Red as the townsfolk cheered. You saved my home, she said. Red adjusted his hat. You saved it. I just helped. She looked at him, something unreadable in her eyes. You could stay, you know. Build something here. Red hesitated. He'd spent so long running, he'd almost forgotten what it was like to belong somewhere. But in the end, the road always called him back. Red swung into his saddle. I ain't the staying kind. Eleanor smiled, but there was a sadness in it. Then at least take this. She handed him a silver pocket watch, her late husband's. Red nodded, tucking it into his coat. Then, with a tip of his hat, he rode out, leaving Black Hollow free once more. And somewhere down the road, another town was waiting. Another fight to be won. And Red Redondo would be there.